Alright, so in this particular video, I'm going to talk about some of the tips of presenting at seminar and conferences. And in this particular talk, the basic content is divided into three parts. So in the first part, I'm talking about how to take preparation about the talk. Then I will be talking about how to give a presentation, and the last part is mostly about handling the question answer period. So at first, let us take a look at how to prepare some of the contents of your presentation. At the very beginning of your talk, keep a outline slide where you basically outline what are the topics you are going to cover in that talk. That generally gives the audience a very good idea about the items that you are going to cover, so they are better prepared and there is no surprise there. The second point that I want to mention is that the audience level, knowing the audience level is very important. Whether you are going to present this to lay audience, whether you are going to present this to only epidemiologists, whether there will be many methodologists within the audience and things like that. Those are the things you need to think a bit ahead so that you can try to connect with the audience with your presentation. And before the main discussion, it is always a good idea to give a proper context and background of your presentation, or particularly if you are talking about your research, it is a good idea to have a hook for your opening. I'm going to talk about this hook part a bit later. Where possible, try to limit the jargons and technical terms at a minimum, especially at the very beginning of the talk and at the very end of the talk. In the middle of the talk, when you are talking about your methods and things like that, then maybe it is somewhat okay. But again, if you do not know that all of the audience members know about these technical jargons and terms, it is probably a good idea to keep them at a minimum. But if you are presenting your work in a scientific conference or a class or in a seminar where you exactly know that all of the audience members have exact idea about those technical terms, then probably it is okay to use those. When you are giving your take-home message at the very end of your talk, it is always a very good idea to think about the overall talk that you are giving and what is the one key point that you absolutely want the audience to take away from your talk, and summarize that at the very end in a nice way, so that generally follows all of the logic that you have developed from the beginning to the end. Alright, so in terms of the hook that I told you that I will talk about, there are many different techniques that people use to make the audience wake up or make your audience wanting to learn more about your topic. So there are a couple of different ideas how people generally use this hook. Say for example, at the very beginning they can try to make a very provocative statement but often that might not really go in your favor, and that might create an awkward situation. The technique that I generally use is that I try to ask a very general question to the audience at the very beginning, and sometimes that works. Sometimes I see that the audience members get interested about the talk after I ask that very general question. So for example, when I'm talking about any particular disease, say for example cardiovascular disease, I generally talk about, so are you familiar with this part of the cardiovascular disease? Or if I'm talking about methodology, then I generally ask at the very beginning, who among you are familiar with this particular type of methodology? And sometimes you get some response, sometimes you don't, and that is okay. You can say that, oh, for those who already know, you can probably correct me, or you can probably give more ideas, and for those who do not know, that's okay. I'm just going to explain these ideas anyway. Same for the asking rhetorical question. Generally people respond very well if you are giving your personalized own experience. So in your hook, if you try to give an explanation of why to begin with you were interested in this particular research, and give you your personal background and story about what is it in your life that made or led you to do this kind of research, that could be one way. You can have something very nice visually, or maybe some animation that you can use. You can try to tell a joke. Often people bring some object in the seminar and then they show it to the audience, and then the audience member might be interested about that. Alright, so in terms of your slides, it is always a very good idea to have a title that is short and informative. In the slide, do not try to put too many ideas, maybe just one idea per slide if that is possible, or maybe 2 ideas if that is manageable. And of course, if you are putting one idea per slide, and if you are having too many slides, that is also not something good. You probably have to make a balance. It is always a good idea to have large fonts, at least size 24, so that your audience members can see clearly what you are writing. It is generally a bad idea to put full sentences. So the idea is that if you are writing full sentences, you do not need to be there. You do not need to really present that. People can just take a look at the slides and they can just read off the slide, and they may not even listen to what you are saying. So you are using the presentation slide to assist you, not to replace you, right? So try to use keywords and phrases and pictures, but not the full sentences copy pasted from your manuscript or thesis. Always a good idea to show pictures, tables and graphs in an informative way. Again, if you are showing table which has 20 different rows and 7 different columns and all of the footnotes, that is also not going to be useful. Try to show them the comprehensive version of the table, as well as you can try to highlight the relevant portion of the table. Alright, so it is always a good idea to practice about your presentation, particularly, say for example, if you're going to make a presentation for a conference or seminar, even for a class which will be graded. It is always a good idea to practice in such a way that you have a very good understanding about your timing, particularly if you are trying to keep some time at the very end, so that the audience members can get to ask some question. Say for example, in a conference, if you are just presenting and do not leave any time for the audience interaction or question answer or discussion, then probably you are not going to get much input from the audience. Part of the reason you are going to a conference is because not that you will teach everybody in the conference, but also you will engage in a discussion through your presentation, so that you can exchange ideas and improve your own work based on those idea exchange. And If possible, try to practice with your teammates, people from your lab, your supervisor, with your friends, family, depending on the importance of the talk, and try to anticipate what kind of questions people are asking. And of course, I mean, if you are going to give a presentation and if you do not know what are the equipments that are available in this room, that might be awkward. Sometimes you are going there with your presentation slides only, but you might see that they do not have the technology to use some of the slides or some of the softwares that you are using. People may not even have a PowerPoint. They may have Adobe Acrobat or something like that, or maybe they have PowerPoint, but that PowerPoint is a different version of the PowerPoint that can open your PowerPoint slides but may not show those slides appropriately. So you have to be prepared about all these kind of scenarios, and it is always a good idea to check in advance what kind of equipments are there that will be available for presentation. Say for example, if you are expecting a large crowd and you thought that there will be a microphone available but there was none, and you have to shout basically, that can dramatically change the pattern of your presentation. Alright, in terms of giving a talk, it is always a very good idea to show your enthusiasm. So if you are presenting your own work, your own research work, where you have been working for months to do that work and you are not even interested to talk about your research with enthusiasm, then the audience members might not be even interested to. An important point is to make the eye contact, because if you are reading off your slides and if you are not communicating or connecting with your audience, sometimes the audience also lose contact. Think about your body language. Are you doing something awkward when you are presenting? Are you talking in a monotonous tone like the way I'm talking right now? During your presentation, probably you should talk with your enthusiasm, and you should vary your pace so that people know where to pay attention and where it is not as important. And it is good idea to pause when necessary. Pausing can be a very interesting and strong tool to get more attention to the particular message that you are trying to give in a particular talk. If you are just going to talk without any break, sometimes people can lose interest. And this is very important, and that is why you need to practice, because you need to stay within time. That is very important. If you are going over time and you are taking up time from your next presenter, this is something that nobody really likes. Some of the things that people generally do is reading from the slides. This is generally not a good idea. If you are presenting, you should know by heart what you are presenting. If you are moving around and blocking the screen, that is also annoying for the audience members. Using filler words. If you see some of the talks by Elon Musk, you will see he uses a lot of filler words, and sometimes that can be jarring. And generally speaking, if you are well prepared, you can, and you are aware that you use a lot of filler words like I do, then you can maybe try to pause and try to not put too many filler words when you are talking, or especially when you are giving a public presentation. then you can try to avoid some of these. Alright, particularly for the question answer period at the very beginning of your talk, give an idea to the audience members that you are going to allow some time for the question answers, and at the very end of your talk, keep some time for the discussion and ask the question. Often what happens is that you are asking that do you have any questions, and who wants to ask the first question and things like that, but nobody is responding. Then you can yourself say, one question that always comes after my presentation is this one, and I try to answer it this way. What do you think? And try to engage with the audience member and try to see whether you can get some interaction from your audience members. Otherwise, if you are giving a talk and nobody is asking any question, that can be a very bad sign that maybe nobody is either interested or maybe nobody even understood what you were talking about. Alright, generally if you have a large audience, it is always a very good idea to repeat the question or rephrase the question, and that does two things. One, if you are using a microphone, if you are not repeating question, people at the back or on the other end do not have a very good idea what the question was. The other purpose is that when you are repeating the question, often you are rephrasing the question, and that allows you some time to think about the answer, right? And if you are not sure about the answer, say I do not know, do not try to give a long non-answer. If you have an answer, try to give a short answer. And often it can happen that you might get a aggressive question. It is generally a good idea to think about those questions before you directly try to answer. If your audience member has pointed out a limitation of your study, maybe think about it, and if you agree, say that yes, this is a limitation and we want to address this limitation in this way and that way. Or maybe if you haven't thought about that, thank the person who pointed out that limitation and say that you will think about this a bit more. But sometimes what happens is that you might get a question where you do not really agree with the way the question was asked or the way they are phrasing the question about your research. Then being aggressive or giving an aggressive response is not going to be helpful. Take a step back and try to think about that, and if you do not have a answer right away, maybe after the talk we can connect and discuss further.